Hi there, Scott ROCKFILE back with another podcast review for you. Let's talk about that new 4K edition of The Exorcist. Before I get into a tiny little bit of background and personal perspective, I will just say that if you love The Exorcist, pick up the 4K edition. It is not quite what Warner Brothers did with something like 2001: A Space Odyssey, but it is pretty amazing. And I'm only going to be talking about the actual theatrical version. I have yet to watch the longer extended director's cut, whatever they called it, because it's not my favorite thing in the world. I will watch it eventually, but I can't compare the two because I haven't watched it yet. So we'll just be talking about the original version of the movie in 4K with a little bit of perspective to let you know. But yeah, it's worth picking up. The Atmos is great, and the transfer is probably a 4.5 out of 5. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close. Always been a rough-looking movie. I was a kid when it came out. I couldn't go to the theater to see an R-rated movie in 1973-74 when it was still playing in theaters, but I vividly remember the news stories, people talking about it, people throwing up in the theater, people having to go to therapy afterwards. I mean, it really, I don't know that there's ever been a movie before or after that so polarized people that everybody was, people were afraid to go to the theater to see this. I know that's hard to imagine. It's just a movie. But the stories built up so much. Saw a little bit of that with Jaws. Like when Jaws was very, very popular and we went to the beach that summer, no adults went into the water. All the kids did, but no adult, anyone who had seen the movie did not go in the water that summer. That was the only other time that I saw a movie like hit the Zeitgeist so hard it affected everything in my life. Well, Exorcist, I remember how big a deal it was, and people were talking about it. I mean, I was a kid. I was like 7 years old, 7, 8 when it came out. And I can remember when it got its debut on TV that they ran a warning before and during each break. It was one of the very few movies in my childhood that was an R-rated movie that was brought to broadcast television that got that kind of edit and that kind of scrutiny. But again, there hasn't been a movie that's affected people like this. When was the last time you heard people throwing up in a movie theater and scared to walk out of, So by the time I watched it, I think it was probably, I did watch it on TV when they finally showed it. But when I saw the actual version, unedited and everything, I was probably in high school. And I thought it was fine. It didn't affect me like it did the people back a decade before or whatever. Watching it now, it definitely was ahead of its time. William Friedkin did some great things with the film. They pulled it off at a time when things like that were just taboo. You just didn't make movies about realistic depictions of evil, devils, things like that. There have been some, but they were all cartoony and dudes in rubber masks and things. And this was kind of real and gritty and down to earth and had big stars in it, and people that could act, and you had a good director and a good cinematographer, and it all came together in a movie that stands up. I mean, watching it now in its new 4K edition doesn't seem as old as it is. I mean, it's over 50 years old, but it's well done. It's really well done, and it affects you in different ways. It doesn't hold up to some of the horror movies of today. It's just not as gory. It's not as shocking but it was back in the day. So a little bit of background that I've had with the film, and I've always loved the film. I did have on Blu-ray the director's cut, the extended version. It adds 10 minutes of stuff. It's scenes that should have been cut out and were cut out. Things that we had heard about, things that were talked about, but you see them back in the film, they don't exactly work. They also put in some subliminal things with some special effects that they really couldn't do at the time, that they tried and it didn't come off. These were all things that they probably tried to originally do. It's not like they radically changed the movie to do new stuff with it, but they did radically change the movie and ruin some things. And I don't watch that version when I want to watch the movie. I watch the original version. But that being said, I will post a secondary podcast at some point. I will watch that and get into details on what I didn't like about the extended version. But I'm glad that Warner Brothers gives us both, because I'm sure there's somebody out there that likes that wanted more. There's a new sequel coming. I don't care. I mean, I'm sure it's, I hope it's going to be great. But you've got the same guy that kind of screwed the pooch on the last 3 Halloween movies. He started strong and ended really weak. And he wants to put his fingerprints on this. That just sounds like a really bad idea. They made a sequel. It wasn't very well received. They made a third one. It wasn't very well received at the time, but that one's actually, in retrospect, not a bad flick. But this is still the one, and there's never been a movie like it, and there never will be another movie like it. Going back to this well is probably pointless, but I'm not going to say never. Maybe. I've been surprised on remakes, reboots, prequels, sequels before, so hopefully Blumhouse and David Green can do something well with the property. The trailers don't impress me yet. This is great if you're a fan. I don't know why the UK gets better versions than we do. We will get the same steelbooks and stuff, but they get all sorts of other swag in there, postcards or whatever. We just get the 4Ks. We don't even get Blu-rays. We did get digital copies, so it's nice to have a digital copy of both versions of Exorcist. I read some reviews before I watched it that the Atmos was a little overblown. And I don't know that I totally agree with that, but the soundtrack, like Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon and a few others, has been brought into modern times. I don't think it's as jarringly different as Enter the Dragon was. It still sounds like The Exorcist, but everything's clearer. The sound effects, I heard things, especially in the opening scenes in Iraq and stuff that I had never heard before. I saw some things that I've never seen before, just gradations of color, textures. The movie just looked much fresher, much more interesting, much more varied. All sorts of things. The set design, the costumes. Even when you just get into, we're just in the Georgetown house and the things that are going on with Linda Blair's character. It's all incredibly well done with practical effects, and we just don't get that kind of stuff in horror movies anymore. So, if you love The Exorcist, this is a great 4K edition. It looks great. It sounds great. It's not perfect. Like I said, it's not... Warner Brothers knocked it out of the park on things like 2001. This one's close, but then again, this movie wasn't probably as well taken care of and well preserved as something like 2001. Maybe not, but it should have been. And at this point, a 4.5 out of 5 is pretty good. Well, I don't know that you could expect much more. Movie looks great, has a fine layer of film grain, looks like a film, but there were some colors that jumped out at me. I'm sure a lot of people are going to talk about the puke looks really great. I mean, it looks really vividly green. There's some other things that I just don't remember them being that vivid of colors, but that's what you get with HDR. All in all, it's a worthy package. The Best Buy Steelbook is already sold out, I think, so you probably missed it on that, but you can get the movie for like $20. You're getting 2 versions of the film in 4K with Dolby Atmos, upgraded to the highest standard of what we can do today with home video. It's pretty good. Like I said, I'd give the whole package about a 4.5 out of 5. Could use a few more of the extras that were on the original edition. That's nowhere to be found on here. But I really just need the movie. For some of these older films, especially one I'm very familiar with and watched all those extras back in the day, and I've still got the old Blu-ray or whatever, I'm fine with just the movie release. Now, if they wanted to put some new extras in there or whatever, or maybe some stuff about the upcoming movie, that would have been great, but they didn't. All in all, it's worth the money. If it's only $20 for the 4K, I think that's more than wait till Black Friday. It'll be even cheaper. Exorcist is a win on 4K. It's not a 5 out of 5 go run out tomorrow like Enter the Dragon was or 2001: A Space Odyssey. But for fans of the film, you have to put this in your collection. It's just the best it's looked and sounded. Really enjoyed some of the early stuff in Iraq. That really sets up a lot of things later in the movie that I just didn't catch on to when I was younger. Watching it now, and I've seen it several times recently, this was the best version of the film. So, pick up Exorcist in 4K when you can. It's definitely worth it. High marks. Not the highest, but pretty close. Scott, I'm ROCKFILE. More podcasts on the way. Thanks for listening. Have a spectacular day.